ISIS, Ebola, Obamacare, the VA, just some of the things members of the president's own party say have been mismanaged.
I think the last 2 years have been a lot of mixed messages in terms of what the United States' role is going to be.
Do you think that the Obama administration has done an appropriate job handling the Ebola crisis?
We blew it when it came to the rollout of the healthcare.gov.
Mr. President, we need urgency. We need you to roll up our sleeves and get into these hospitals.
Now, those are all Democrats, folks, not Republicans. So is it time for our commander-in-chief to take a lesson in management from our chief executives? Hi, everybody. I'm David Aswin. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus to find out with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Elizabeth McDonald, along with Rick Unger and Mike Ozanian. So, Rich, do you blame the manager?
Well, you know, I don't think he was ever cut out to be a manager. Look, President Obama is many things. He's a law school professor. He's a writer. He tends to be cool, aloof. He's a loner. He's an introvert. These are good qualities in a writer or a law school professor. They're terrible qualities in a leader or manager, particularly if you're the CEO of the United States and the leader of the free world. And it's, you know, a lot of us spotted this tendency very early in his presidency and in his first campaign. But I think since the rollout of Obamacare, and now particularly accelerating this year with the botched reaction to ISIS and Ebola, you know, everybody's aware that for whatever his virtues are, he's a terrible manager.
And Rick, it's not just an academic point. I mean, there are bureaucracies that are spinning out of control, to use the president's phrase, and some of the actions or the results of this are people dying, like with the VA hospitals, like with Ebola.
This is a tough one for me, David. I have to tell you, it has not been a good year for our president. I have been a frequent critic of the VA, so I can't disagree there. I do think that we're coming down a little too hard on him on the Ebola thing, a little too soon. We've had one unfortunate death that we got a long way to go to. You can say it's been mismanaged. I would also point out that every year we lose 12 to 15,000 people in this country from the flu, so we should focus more on that. All in all, though, I hate to say it, I don't give this president high marks.
But Mike, when you look at chief executives in the business community, and you see the good ones, that is, the ones who've really done an incredible job at turning companies around, people like Jack Welch, who used to be the head of GE, here's what he said about what a really good manager has. People with integrity take responsibility for past actions, admit mistakes, and fix them. Has President Obama fit any of those descriptions?
No, I agree with Rich. It's not in his DNA. But I disagree with the comparison to a CEO. I think a president is not a CEO. He's a leader. And to be a great leader, you have to be able to, number one, be honest, which President Obama has not. Number two, you have to be a uniter. President Obama is a divider. He pits people of different classes against each other. And you need a clear path for prosperity and defense, which clearly he has not had.
But, Steve, I think the analogy does fit. I think there are times when the commander-in-chief has to be a good manager. And Jack Welch, and you know, you've talked to thousands of managers in your career. One of the attributes of a good manager is if you're going down the wrong path, you change it. You admit that you've made a mistake, and you change it. We have a president who won't admit he's made any mistakes.
Well, he's a rigid ideologue who does not learn from reality, which is whether you're a manager or just a person with common sense, you learn. Experience as a teacher, and this man refuses to learn from it. So I don't want a super manager in terms of shuffling paper. I want somebody who has good judgment, puts this country in the right direction, and the American people will take it from there. This president's incapable of doing that. He's wrecked these agencies, abused regulatory agencies, undermined the Constitution, and what he's done on the financial side with the Federal Reserve, with what Dodd-Frank has done to lending to small and new businesses, everywhere you look, this guy's been a failure.
It reminds me of Jimmy Carter, doesn't it? When Jimmy Carter, because of his inactions or his bad actions overseas or at home, things were spinning out of control.
Right. Newsflash, the Earth does spin on its axis, and events happen. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we know that the president has said he will use his pen and his phone, but he tends to use it to beat up on oil executives or the banks or, you know, to intervene in health care. Why not use the pen and the phone instead of being reactive, be preemptive. It always feels like we're hurting cats after the fact. And he also tends to outsource and leave the fine print to others. What strikes me about Ebola is, we have hospital workers letting patients go. Why do we think our airport security workers will also not let them go?
Well, Rich, he leaves things to other people, as Emac was saying, because he believes in the power of the government to solve problems that they can't solve. Is that going too far?
Well, I think that's right, but they're layered onto that is this whiny passivity, which is why we're reminded of Jimmy Carter. Look, if President Obama wants a progressive big government role model, he should look to FDR. Now, I disagree with FDR's economic policies. Thought he was a great military leader in World War II, but he was, the last thing he was whiny. He had that uplifted chin. He always projected this aura of confidence and action, that this president does not.
Rick, is there anything that this president has spoken on or done that inspires confidence in you?
Well, there's quite a bit going back in the original
what?
years. As you know, I'm a fan of the healthcare reform movement. Just for starters, you look at some of the numbers in terms of employment, 10 million more now than when he came in. I can give you a list of things that he did well. But let me say this, though, David. One thing that does concern me is the tendency to go over the top. You asked the question, should government be messing with these things? Who else is going to handle an Ebola outbreak? Who else is going to handle ISIS? These are all government functions. You can criticize if you feel that they're not being done well, and I'd probably share some of that criticism with you, but they are, in fact,
well, Mike, the point
functions.
is, can government do what he says it can do? I mean, just take Ebola, for example. Yes, it's something that in Africa is out of his control at the moment, but he said that we're not going to be bringing any cases in, which is, in fact, what happened. Luckily, it's only been one confirmed case so far, but who knows how many more. The government, he overpromises what the government can deliver.
Here's the big problem I have, and why I don't think the comparison to Jimmy Carter is direct and accurate. Carter at least believed in what he was trying to do, as big a debacle as he was. President Obama, when he ordered those troops home from Afghanistan against what General Petraeus wanted, Robert Gates said that Obama didn't even believe in his own policy in Afghanistan, that he was doing it purely for the vote. That is a catastrophic type of leadership, and that's where this president has failed this country.
Well, and Steve, again, if a CEO did that sort of thing, actually does engage in dishonesty in the way that Mike just spelled it out, that's a disaster. That means the company's not going to survive with him as in the leadership role, right?
And he has undermined the security of the United States. If he had left troops in Iraq, which he should have done, ISIS never would have arisen in the first place. It was pure election politics that he made that premature withdrawal. And the thing about Carter, for all of his faults, Carter learned. At the end of his presidency, he began to increase defense spending, do things against the Soviet Union. And he put in deregulation of transportation, which saved the railroad industry. So the man could learn from experience. This president adamantly refuses to learn from experience, and so that's why we have this disastrous thing in the world today where people feel that things are spinning out of control.
Well, Emac, unlike the private sector, in the public sector, you have a term, and unless he's impeached, and I don't think that's going to happen, he's going to serve another 2 years. In the private sector, of course, you'd have a rebellion among the board of directors, and he'd be out of there, right?
And the shareholders, too, and that's what's up for the voters, right? I mean, the problem with the president right now and the administration is whenever they're challenged or something goes wrong, they blame budget cutbacks. They blame sequestration when that's really not the case, when actually the money is there for these officials to do the right thing. And the other thing, too, is the president consistently is stress testing the patience and the security of the United States with some of the policies, decisions he's been making.
Rich, final word from you. What happens if, in fact, there is a change in the leadership of the Senate? The president will have 2 houses against him. Does that mean we just won't get anything done? Which I remember John Tammany said that might not be such a bad thing.
Well, on the economic front, John Tammany has an argument going for him. But when you look at the chaos in the world, we cannot afford to have a president who's kind of gone into this passive hole, surrounded by his B team from Chicago. It's going to be a disaster for the world.
All right, that's got to be the last.